The head of the World Health Organization says urgent action is needed in the Ethiopian region of Tigray in order to avert genocide. A civil war between the Ethiopian government and neighboring Eritrea on one side and the Tigray People's Liberation Front on the other has been fought since 2020. Violence has intensified since a truce broke down in August. Here's what the WHO chief said.
This is a health crisis for 6 million people, and the world is not paying enough attention. I urge the international community and the media to give this crisis the attention it deserves. There is a very narrow window now to prevent genocide. I repeat, there is a very narrow window now to prevent genocide in Tigray.
The United Nations has warned that the fighting in Tigray is spiraling out of control and has repeated its call for an immediate ceasefire. Countless people are at risk of going hungry as the Ethiopian government tightens a blockade.
Women prepare food for troops on the front line. For our safety and survival, they chant for Tigray television cameras. For nearly 2 years, war has been raging between Tigray's regional rulers and Ethiopian and Eritrean troops. The Tigray forces are practically surrounded, and Addis Ababa is severely restricting humanitarian aid from entering the area.
The UN Human Rights Commission has documented the aid blockade. Their report came out just a few weeks ago, and it details for the first time very clearly the way the Ethiopian side has been using hunger as a weapon, and it, of course, explicitly criticises that.
This is Shire a year ago. Tigrayan fighters had driven out the Ethiopian military to much celebration. Now the city, one of the biggest in Tigray, has been recaptured by Ethiopian and Eritrean troops. There is no new footage. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians are estimated to have been killed since the beginning of the conflict, largely out of the sight of the world's media. The UN says more than 5 million people now rely on food aid, nearly 90% of the population. Every third child is suffering from malnutrition, and infant and maternal mortality are also much higher than before the conflict. The devastated healthcare system has made the situation even worse.
Whatever is remaining is barely functioning. And according to the original report, more than 80% of health centers and hospitals are destroyed.
The region was already suffering from the effects of climate change. Now, with the conflict, the crisis is rapidly becoming a humanitarian catastrophe.
Let's take this to Samuel Getachew, an Ethiopian journalist following the conflict. He joins us now from Nairobi. Samuel, what's the situation on the ground in Tigray at the moment?
What we know at the moment is it's getting close. The Ethiopian forces are getting close to Mekelle. They've recaptured the town of Shire, which is the town that's the home of the head of the TPLF, Dr. Debretsion. So they're getting close. There doesn't seem to be any willingness to compromise on this conflict that began almost 2 years ago and has affected millions of Ethiopians. Even famine that really defined Ethiopia in the 1984-85 Ethiopian famine seems to be coming to this region, and that's where we are at the moment.
There are reports of people being deprived of access to healthcare. We just saw food, education, and financial aid. How does the Ethiopian government justify that blockade?
Well, the Ethiopian government is blaming TPLF, and TPLF is countering the argument that it's them that's preventing aid from arriving to the region of Tigray. It's not just Tigray that's been affected by this conflict. It's also Amhara and Afar. But the Ethiopian government has said once they capture towns like Shire and Alamata, they're going to open a humanitarian corridor to assist the people that are really suffering as a result of this conflict. They have also said part of Amhara will be accessible to organizations like WFP to ensure that food aid would finally arrive to this region that has been deprived much of the basic humanitarian need that's really needed in this region.
Eritrea has become a major player in this conflict. Can you explain what the neighboring country's role is in all of this?
Well, the Ethiopian Prime Minister a year ago said that the Eritreans are getting involved to really fight for their interest. He has said from Parliament that there is fear that they might take over or they might really outreach their borderline and come to Tigray and really disturb, or the TPLF might come to Eritrean side and really disturb the interests of Eritrea. So he's been saying that they're only involved to really keep their interest intact. But the TPLF has been saying that they're involved trying to perhaps create some kind of genocide. But the Ethiopian government has insisted that's not why they are involved, but they're involved to really keep their interest intact. But again, this conflict, I have to highlight, has really affected millions of Ethiopians. The UN has been echoing the problem in terms of how many millions have become victims of this really violent, war that began 2 years ago. And it's not just affecting Ethiopia, but thousands of Ethiopians have been heading to the Sudan looking for some kind of safety net that's really not available at home.
Yeah, peace negotiations have been postponed just recently. Is there any hopes of reaching a compromise through negotiations and reaching peace?
There has been rumors that they're going to have some kind of peace negotiation happening in South Africa. The last negotiation that was to have taken place in South Africa, the former president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, has said that he wasn't consulted enough to really push this negotiation to move forward. The TPLF has been saying that they haven't been consulted in terms of their logistical support that's needed to transport them to South Africa to really sit down with the Ethiopian side and agree on some kind of ceasefire. But there is a uniform understanding between both sides that this war, unless it's stopped or slowed down, is going to be affecting millions of Ethiopians on both sides.
Samuel Getachew speaking to us from Nairobi. Thanks.
Thank you.